Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. As you can see, a lot is happening here on the network. A lot to break down. Let's get in my guests right now. I have a bunch of them joining me. First up, new to the program, criminal defense attorney Asit Panwala. Asit, great to have you here. Let's start with the financial transactions. Catherine Magbanua said that she was getting the money from working in the nightlife industry, although the prosecution just said that it can't be possible. And why was she receiving this money from the Adelson Dental Institute when really she didn't seem to be employed there? And even if that was the case, she's not the girlfriend of Charlie Adelson, so it wasn't even she would be put on the payroll that way. What do you think about where the prosecution went with the financial transactions regarding Catherine Magbanua?
I thought it was the most damning evidence against Magbanua. That spike of money is just such a large amount of money to be coming at one time. And it's not consistent with how much money she was earning from working. And just the inordinate amount of money that the family, the Adelsons, gave her, just kind of makes her look guilty. So I think it's very damning evidence.
Exactly. I mean, why else was she getting this money? And especially given the time frame of it. You know, Brad, the other thing that they were just getting into was this, the note, the sting operation in a way, having the undercover approach Donna Adelson and saying, she didn't go to the police. What did you think about that?
Again, like Asit was saying, it's probably the best part of the closing is all these pieces that make sense. Why wouldn't she? And that's why I don't really like closings from like the prosecution standpoint, because it does makes everybody look guilty. Maybe she was afraid. I mean, she was obviously a suspect, obviously a target to this investigation, as is her son and her daughter. Maybe she panicked. Maybe she was afraid if she didn't do it, they'd kill her. I mean, there could be a million reasons.
And you know, Terry, we're looking at this. We're hearing so much about the Adelsons. People are probably wondering, why on earth was Charlie Adelson not arrested and indicted? And I guess one of the theories is this a way for the state to see if their case works? Hey, let's see if we can actually successfully prosecute people regarding the Dan Markel case. And if we can successfully prosecute Garcia and Magbanua, maybe then we can go to Charlie Adelson. What do you think about that?
I think that's exactly right, Jesse. I think they want to make sure they have the Adelsons. And with these trials and with these convictions, their theories are panning out, and they'll be able to go back and try all of the Adelsons, frankly. I mean, Charlie clearly, but the fact that, Donna and Wendy, the mother and the sister, were also implicated in this. So I do think that the prosecution is trying to establish the foundation and that ultimately they will go after the Adelsons.
That would be absolutely surreal to see them being brought up on charges after what's happening here. All right, so see, there's a lot to break down from this. And these phone calls, I mean, what do you make of the phone calls? As you know, that for me, that was one of the most fascinating days of testimony. So what's your interpretation of this? I mean, how important is this for the prosecution's case? Because when we talk about a potential prosecution of Charlie Adelson, a majority of that, if not the whole case, would be based upon these phone calls. What do you make of them?
Right. I mean, so I thought the money by itself was damning, but there can always be another explanation for how someone has so much money. But these phone calls are also damning. Why would you be engaged in these conversations if you had nothing to do with a murder? It would be really awkward to be to claim that you're leaving phone messages or be even involved in these kinds of conversations. And it suggests that she knows a lot more than what she claimed at trial at her testimony. So I think it's very damning to her. I think it certainly can be used against Charlie Adelson. Whether that would be enough by itself, I'm not sure. I think they would need a little bit more than just these phone calls.
Well, that's the question that I have, Brad, as I was listening to this. Magbanua was more in a position of Charlie Adelson than Garcia is. Garcia, they're saying, is the trigger man, or at least was the person in the car. She wasn't. So if they can convict her based upon the financial transactions, based upon communications and the phone calls, does that give them enough to say, hey, now we can go after Charlie Adelson? Because he's in a similar position.
I think, first of all, it also shows that their evidence was compelling because it is largely circumstantial. And like we were talking about on break, I think that they do want to go after the Adelsons, but because there's so many of them and possibly a lot of wealth behind them, that they want to make sure they have an ironclad case before they even start.
Now, Terry, let me ask you this. So much of this is Charlie Adelson. Do you think, based upon what we've heard so far, there would be enough to prosecute Wendy Adelson or Donna Adelson or Harvey Adelson, or really would it begin with Charlie? And again, he hasn't been charged with anything. He hasn't been arrested. But would the case start with him, or because I don't know if they have enough even against him, but let alone against the other family members?
I think that the case would begin and end with Charlie. I think clearly Donna, the mother, is not a good person and that she's trying to help Charlie. And I think clearly Wendy is involved. And in fact, Wendy might be brought in as well. But I think the prosecution is going to want to make sure that they can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. So they're not going to go after the entire family. They'll implicate the others. But I think they'll go after Charlie and maybe go after Wendy, since she obviously is involved because it was, her ex-husband who was killed. But it might have been Charlie's idea. So he's definitely number one on the list.
Asit, I want to get one more question for you before we go to break. The question is why, obviously, Charlie has not been indicted yet, and of course, we want to see what the conclusion of this case is. But then if you have two people who are convicted, Magbanua and Garcia, what could you offer them to provide that testimony that the state needs to go after Charlie Adelson? We were just talking about before, she got on the stand yesterday and said she thinks he did this. So again, if you can't get her, what could you compel her with? What can you, offer her to provide testimony in an upcoming trial against Charlie Adelson if she's ultimately convicted and sentenced to life in prison?
Well, you could offer her a lesser sentence. Right now, it's life without parole. Maybe you can offer a 25 to life sentence with the opportunity of parole. With Garcia, he has the potential of the death penalty. Maybe take the death penalty off the table to go after the source of this whole crime in the first place, Charlie Adelson. Of course, the Adelson defense is going to be able to say, look, these people are only testifying against me because they're looking for their own self-interest. They're self-interested. They were convicted, and now they're going to get lesser sentences. But that could be one way of getting them to flip, and then going after Charlie Adelson.
It's fascinating. This is a fascinating case. We're going to take a break. When we come back, more of the prosecution. I believe about 10 minutes ago, she said she had about 30 more minutes left. So let's go back. We'll take a break and we'll jump back live. Stay tuned.